Committee, and for this morning's plenary session, I'm going to be your MC. Before we begin our event today, it's important to take a moment and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered here, as well as to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So let's take a moment and appreciate the beauty of this land and the people who have cared for it for so long. With that, I'd like to welcome Diane Appleby, who belongs to the saltwater country of the Yarru and Karajari people of the Kimberley West Coast, to perform the Welcome to Country. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. How are you? I guess I can say, are you okay? We did have a Are You OK day last week. It was fantastic to have everybody checking on everyone, how they're feeling with their lian. So lian is just a beautiful, gentle word, soft but strong. It gives us a sense of belonging when you talk about lian, and brings us back to country. And this is what we're all about here. Working on country, working for country, caring for country, because something magic happens on country. It provides a beautiful food source. And our country is rich with these great resources. Water, the most essential part of growth. So we need to know all of these fabulous resources. We might have buru, but we need jila as well. We need water. Now, before I start this welcome to country, thank you, Matt, and thanks to the Australian Rangeland Society to be coming into Yarru country. It's a magical place. Once you learn to dream and have bugarigara in this country, the magic starts to come alive. But without further ado, for me to continue this, I want to give acknowledgement to all our people that have contributed to us being here, for their knowledge and their dreaming and their understanding. Some have left us in recent months, and some have left us a few years ago, but we will always remember them and never forget their knowledge. Knowledge is power, and that's why we stand here. I stand here upon this podium to speak. And as Matt say, there's a plenary, but I'm not going to do a plenary here today. I'm just doing the welcome to country. So I want to just give a minute silence for our people that have contributed so much to a lot of our health and well-being and our operations, part of the governance and part of our taking care of country. So let's just give the minute silence for your families, our families, and everyone else that have made a contribution to why we become the Australian Rangeland Society. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for that respect, because we need to give respect to those pioneers. They're not pioneers, they become heroes for us. And that's the important part of us being here. My acknowledgement also, I got my brother Anda, who's our senior law boss. He's standing out the back. He's a gentleman. But Anda, my acknowledgement and respect Senior Cultural Law Boss. We must respect all our cultural leaders. I have Nyambaburu Yaru CEO, Nini Mills here, our leading land management, land and sea country manager, Dean Matthews. Thank you, Dean. And all the country managers that are here today. We are so fortunate to have in Yarra office a section of that, of looking after country. In language, we call that Waljala Jala Buru Jaida Jaringun Buru. And this is a powerful, significant way of empowering our people to look after country. Now, Matt, don't you ask me to repeat it and give me my speech, because you tell me speak from my land. And this is what you're going to receive today. Our people have been on this land, tilling the soil, looking after country. They've been the IPA managers, country managers. They've been the conservationists. We would not be here standing on this podium speaking about land, because they were looking after country for generations. They found water. They knew where the natural, organic, pure food source. And we appreciate that knowledge. I got up this morning and I'm thinking about this speech, and I'm thinking, how am I going to do this speech? We're talking about rangelands. They were the rangers. They studied the flora and fauna, and their knowledge were handed down because it was all oral history. They could not write these things. We didn't have the writing skills. So I want to give, that's why I pay homage and respect to our most senior people. They're amazing. I used to tell my mother, "You're an amazing woman." And she said, "No, I'm not." The humility of our old people. I walked past the advertisement of innovation, the things that we want to spend time in giving and finding key words to capture our eyes. So Leon is also what we see around us. And what we hear today, I mean not hear as hear, but hear as in listen. Today you will be hearing so many inspirational words to take back to your community. And I hope that you enjoy Broome, Yaru rich country. I believe yesterday their trip out to Gumranganjal was successful, and that those that have attended, you would understand the drive of the Yaru people to take care of this area. And how do we utilize this area to the best ability to sustain? I've seen the word sustainability. Some of these words would mean nothing to our people because they speak language, and we have to marry that language. It's called a collaboration when we come together, both cultures, both ways of working. I say ngaji gurjen. Good morning to you. Mabu ngura garing. Galamabu gurbalan jarer. Galamabu gurbalan jareda nyamba buru yaru. This country will always be Yaru country. We are very proud. When I say Wiria, we are very proud. Old people, when they gave the native title, they said, "We may not be here to see what will come after us, but you will see. We do this for you. The same we will do for our children's children. Galawiria yangar ngaran jungara lian nyamba gunburu. Nyamba buru jira yarun ngan ngarangunil. Bugari gara nyuran jarin gun buru mangara. Forever and ever and ever and ever, this country belongs to Yaro people. Buru is the land. We are very happy that you are here for this Australian 22nd Australian Rangeland Society Workshop Conference. The forum has welcomed many people from around the nations, from different companies, different departments. This is the land of the Yaro people. From time and time before time, always will be forever. No matter what comes, no matter what stories, policies, we will take care of this country. We will share. We will work with you. That collaboration is such an important part. Yaro is not, we may not say unique, but we are such a strong, proud nation. We love to share that with you over the period of time that you're here. Like I said, I believe that yesterday's activity out on Gumranganyal, which is one of the most beautiful areas of our properties and development, and we will work with you. Hold our hands. Yagarma bolanji waranjari gun nganga. Yagarma bolanji, I say, we say come together with one word, nganga. Everything will be good if we respect country. Everything will be good if we respect one another. My old girl used to say, "We can't talk in this microphone." Well, Malabajano might corral us. I said, no. We can talk. We have the privilege or the strength or the honor now. We can talk. And that is the most powerful thing. Now we have a voice that we can share with you and the rest of society. When she say Galamabo Gurbalanjai and Nyamba Boro Yaro, everything that we do and say is absolutely amazing, fantastic, good. You can use any of those words. Is good for us, will be good for you. Our country is alive. And we're here to protect that. You're here to protect your areas. The IPA, the protected areas, that we can work together in making sure that there's going to be a future plan, there's future heritage. If we move too fast, we may not have anything left because we're moving too fast. The development is too fast. So we need to work at the pace, as always, what old people have told us. We protect it to ensure that our cultural values and our stories, our nganga, the spirit is protected. And the life of all of that spirit is maintained. You are very spirited people. We are very spirited people because we care. Our knowledge has been given to us with oral history, as I stated earlier on. our Office of Nyambaburu Yaru have captured so many of these historical activities, areas of safety and safe places and looking after it. When you go home, I hope you take part of Yaru with you. Inspire the areas of your country. My acknowledgement to you because you come here to share all of this. Nganga, you share. Kalau mabo gurbalan, gun gabungan, kalau golar gabungan, yalman gabungan, bano gabungan. You came from the different states, territories, remote areas. You came here to share that knowledge. You came here to also be inspired by others' knowledge. And that knowledge sharing is so important for us here as Australian people. So Maddie, all the best with the team and your leadership here on the microphone. Dean, I know that you will look after us, the Yaru information, Yaru stories, Nini, and all the Yaru operations, country managers. You will be also inspired because we have young people coming through as well. So congratulations, 2023 for your 22nd anniversary. And coming to Broome is a wonderful place. So I hope you enjoy Broome as well. Thank you. Galea.
Diane, thanks very much for that welcome to country. And yeah, we did really have a good feel of Gummerraw Young at Roebuck Plains yesterday, and just lovely seeing all the rangers speaking and the next generation through. So thanks very much, and thank you to all the Yaru Nation people here. That was wonderful, thank you. I'd like to welcome our international delegates, Professor Tipton Hudson from Washington State University, and Alejandro Carrillo, rancher from the Chichuanan Desert, Mexico. Tipton and Alejandro have made a big effort to be here, and we are very grateful for this. So if you see both the gentlemen around, please say good day. I'd also like to welcome members of the Australian Rangeland Society Council who are present. The President, Peter Conradi, Secretary, Bob Shepherd, and Council Member Chris Obst. I'd also like to welcome fellows of the Australian Rangeland Society present here as well. They are Dr. Margaret Friedel, Gary Baston, and Dr. Ken Hodgkinson. I'd also like to welcome the CEO of Nyambaburu Yaru, Nini Mills, and the CEO of Rangelands NRM, Deborah Tarabini. All welcome, thank you. On to some housekeeping. The conference will mostly be paperless conference, and the app will be your main source of information. However, for some of the delegates who prefer to use a hard copy, there are some printed and available at the registration desk at the back. Patience. We have a packed agenda over the next 2.5 days featuring 101 oral presentations and 30 poster presentations. Organising large conferences as regional venues presents its own set of challenges, particularly when trying to accommodate everybody within the conference venue. We kindly ask delegates to bear with us, particularly during concurrent sessions held in the semi-room. While we have seating limited to 100 people, standing will be absolutely fine, and we'll do our best to ensure everybody can fit in. In the mornings, until it's time for morning tea, we'll all gather here in the Jimmy Chai Hall for the plenary presentations. And then after the break and for the rest of the day, we're going to have 2 concurrent sessions going at once. One concurrent session will be here in the Jimmy Chai Hall, and the other concurrent session will be up the back in the semi-room. To help with your transition smoothly between sessions, we will be ringing a bell 5 minutes before the start of each session. This will allow delegates ample time to organise themselves ready for the next session. Posters will be showcased in the Jimmy Chai Hall throughout the conference. On Tuesday and Wednesday evenings, we're going to be hosting drinks and nibbles next to the posters. We encourage poster authors to join us, stand beside their poster and engage in conversation with the delegates. On the conference app, there's also a button where attendees are encouraged to vote for their favourite poster, with the winner to be announced at the conference dinner. There are also 14 expo booths located here in the Jimmy Chai Hall, and I thank the booth holders for making the effort to come and encourage delegates to engage with the booth holders. Tea and coffee. This will be available outside in the courtyard throughout the conference. Morning and afternoon tea and lunch will be served at the back of the hall. For Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram users, we'll be using the hashtag ARS2023. So for Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram users, we're going to be using the hashtag ARS2023. The toilets are located in the Pigram Garden Theatre to the left, and AAP, the conference organisers, are stationed at the registration desk up the back and are available to assist with any questions and provide support throughout the conference. So if something's not right and you just want some more information, so please go and see the AAP team up the back. They'll be able to help you in the right direction of what presentations are coming up next if you'd like to know. To officially open the 22nd Biennial Australian Rangeland Society Conference, I'm delighted to welcome the President, Peter Conradi, to the stage. Peter has been a member of the Australian Rangeland Society since 2010, a council member since 2021, and was elected President at the 2023 AGM. Peter chaired the ARS bid to host the International Rangelands Congress in Australia in 2025. Currently, Peter works for the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries Queensland as the Regional Manager for Extensive Livestock Systems in the Central West and is based in Brisbane. Please join me in welcoming Peter.
Good morning, delegates and honourable guests. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 22nd Biennial Conference of the Australian Rangeland Society, being hosted in Broome. Even more so that we can be here in person. Nothing like a face-to-face conference, and I'm sure you'll all agree. First, I want to thank Diane Appleby for the gracious welcome to country. It is indeed a privilege to hold the conference on the land of the Yawuru people. May the age-old wisdom and knowledge of managing the land and guide and inspire us to have fruitful deliberations and make wise decisions during this week. I was in one of the tours, and I'm sure the other tours were the same. I think we saw a little bit of the magic of the land yesterday while we were traveling around. So thank you for that. I want to thank the organising committee, ably led by Matt Fletcher and Don Burnside, for going out of their way to put this exceptional program together. After being part of the organising committee for the 2015 conference in Alice Springs, I have a real appreciation for the logistical challenges of delivering a conference of this size and nature in one of the more remote locations. It is, however, rewarding to have representatives here from all over the country, and there are about 250 at the last count, so an excellent turnout. But also some international guests, and we really want to welcome those two international guests. We're all here to talk about something that we all have in common, which is our passion for advancement of rangeland science. The rangelands across the world have been under threat for decades due to overutilization, pollution, mismanagement, and natural disaster. With the current world focus on the effect of global warming and climate change, there's also a renewed focus on biodiversity and sustainable use of the rangelands on which we live. And I think we all have a great contribution to make in that discussion. The theme for this conference is aptly Action Stations. And some of the themes that we'll be looking at include carbon, green energy, natural capital, and ecosystem services. There's also a special issue of the Rangeland Science Journal that will be published around this. So I think Brad Witt will be looking around also for more people to include papers there. Successes in grazing management is also one of the themes, always one of the themes of this conference. And in this one, we will focus a fair bit more on science and satellites. Then building resilience. And that involves people, land, animals, and businesses in a land that is prone to drought, flooding, and may I add, fire will be one of our discussion points also. Traditional knowledge is an important part, as is innovation. We need to stay ahead of the game. A very important additional focus area that's been included here is passing on the baton to the next generation. And as we all know, this is really important. And it's good to look at the audience here and you see a good spread of young and more mature people in the audience. We're also very fortunate to have, I think, one of the youngest ever presenters at the conference. Marcus Pierce will be doing a paper. He's a grade 11 student, and he's doing it on behalf of his grandfather, Tom Mann, who recently received the inaugural Excellence in Rangeland Management Award from the ARS. Tom is not able to travel, so Marcus will be presenting that paper. So we really see the young people coming through and taking part. With I think about 140 presentations, that is posters and platform delivered here, I think we will cover all these topics appropriately. The ARS and similar associations across the world have an important role to play to provide unbiased, scientifically based, and user-friendly information, and thereby educate the general public. But even more so, to encourage informed decisions by policymakers at local, regional, national, and international level. There will be further focus on the rangelands at the International Rangelands Conference to be held in 2025 in Adelaide, and then also the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists in 2026. We are very fortunate to have Nicole Spiegel and Dana Kelly at the conference to tell us more about these events at a later stage. ARS Council also asked me to say something about membership, which, as you all know, is essential to maintain a healthy society. Please allow me to share a personal experience. When I arrived in Alice Springs as a mature immigrant in 2010, I had no networks and very few contacts or friends in Australia. Getting to know people such as Margaret Friedel, Gary Baston, and Chris Matern from Alice Springs, and later Deone Walsh, John Taylor, and David Phelps through the Rangeland Society provided an immediate network of trusted colleagues that shared the same passion for the rangelands. Suddenly I had connections with like-minded people all over Australia and beyond. People that frequently had robust discussions, but always, or shall I say mostly, against a background of logic and good science. Through my involvement in the society, I had the opportunity to travel to interesting places all over the world, such as Argentina, Inner Mongolia, Canada, and now to Broome. I therefore encourage you to sign up, if not already, to become a member of the society. The conference would not have been possible without our sponsors, and if we can have the sponsor list on there, please. If it's not there now, it will be on throughout the day. We've had some really good sponsors, exceptional. So I really want to thank all of them, and I think we will do that throughout the conference. A number of them have also got trade stalls, so please go around and have a chat with them. These sponsors have made it possible to put on this event. The organizing committee have done their part in putting this conference together. Our presenters have put in the effort to prepare stimulating and thought-provoking presentations. It is now up to us, all the delegates, to make sure the coming days is something to remember. With that, it is my privilege and indeed a great honor to open the 22nd Australian Rangeland Society Conference in Broome. Thank you.
Peter, thanks very much for the welcoming and opening the 22nd Biennial Conference. We're away. I'd now like to welcome Ninny Mills and Ellen Smith to present the first plenary presentation of the morning on holistic development at Gomerungul, also known as Roebuck Plains Station. Ninny Mills is a Yawuru woman from Broome who is strongly connected to her community and country. She has family ties to the Bunaba and Karadjari nations with extended cultural and family connections across the Kimberley region of Western Australia. Ninny is currently the CEO of Nyamba Buruyaro in Broome and is a highly accomplished community leader. Ninny has over 10 years of experience in senior strategic and management roles in Aboriginal organisations and within government agencies at both state and Commonwealth levels. To Ellen. Coming from a scientific background, Ellen learned early in her career the importance of being able to translate research analysis into practical on-ground solutions. This led her into public policy, a space in which Ellen felt she could deliver meaningful change to regional West Australians based on sound scientific reasoning. Ellen's focus has always been on understanding the issues which face our communities and solving these problems through innovative solutions. More recently, Ellen has stepped into the Chief Business Development Officer role at Nyamba Buruyaro, representing the Yawuru people of the Broome area. Please join me in welcoming Ninny and Ellen for the first plenary presentation of the morning.
Mabunguragarin, ngaji gurijan, ngayu nilawal nini, ngayu ngan banaga jandu, ngayu ngamberlan yaru nganburu, ngayu bibi, kujara jerenel, nilawal jere daji yir bigit maya, ngayu maja jandu, nyambaburu yaru nyirba. Good morning, hello everyone. As introduced, Matt, thank you. My name is Ninny Mills. I am a Banaga woman. Banaga is my skin and one of 4 Yawuru skin groups within our kinship system. I belong to beautiful Yawuru country, having been born and raised here. However, I also proudly acknowledge my Bunaba and Karadjari connections. I'm the proud mother of 2 sons and also the CEO of Nyamba Buruyaro, which, as Matt stated, is the operating arm of the Yawuru prescribed body corporate representing Yawuru native title holders of Broome. I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to Yawuru elders, past and present, for their ongoing resilience that saw Yawuru secure native title recognition in 2006. I also acknowledge Anidai Appleby for a beautiful welcome to country, and I pay my respects to Gaganda, who is a senior lawman of our people and a leader. I also pay respectful recognition to everyone here today, particularly those who have travelled and also my fellow Indigenous countrymen and women in the audience. Today I'm here to showcase Yawuru's holistic development agenda, specifically as it relates to the management and operations of Gomerungul, Roebuck Plains Station. Joining me today is Ellen Smith, NBY's Chief Business Development Officer, who has direct executive oversight of Gomerungul. After my high-level introductory remarks, Ellen will provide an overview of the operational elements of Gomerungul to provide greater insight into our recent successes and our future aspirations. However, to begin, I would like to share some of Yawuru's history. For thousands of years, my Yawuru ancestors have lived along the foreshores of Roebuck Bay, across the Pindan Plains as far inland as the Edgar Ranges and along the fringes of the Great Sandy Desert. We are people of both land and sea. The beautiful country that I was born and raised on is filled with breathtaking natural beauty. And as Yawuru people, we continue to celebrate our connection to it as sustained by our ancestors since Bugarigara, since before time began. For Yawuru, Bugarigara is central to our world. It is the power that created us in all a physical and spiritual sense, and it sustains our laws and cultural beliefs and practices to this day. Yawuru's vision is to sustain a strong, proud, prosperous Yawuru community that is grounded in Bugarigara. Our mission is to strengthen Mabulian for all, always. You heard Ani Dai provide a beautiful description and meaning behind Lian. And to extend on that, in simple translation, our mission is to derive positive well-being for our community. This is ambitious. However, our intent as a community, corporate group, and operating entity is to create platforms and pathways to empowerment and self-determination in recognition that individual empowerment contributes to community empowerment. Unlike mainstream organisations and businesses, our corporation has been developed in line with our cultural foundations and philosophies. This diagram on the screen visually depicts our Yawuru cultural framework, which embeds our strategic pillars, being Mabuburu, healthy country, which is managed by our environmental services unit, Jirongan Ngarungunil, strong community, facilitated by our community development arm, Nalingan Manja, true prosperity, which is our economic development agenda, and finally, Murgulaini Nalingan, which is both cultural and corporate governance. All of these pillars and operating units within Nyambaburu Yawuru are intrinsically linked and are grounded in our cultural values. We apply a holistic development agenda as it relates to the interconnectedness of these pillars in line with our quadruple bottom line objectives, which is strategically intended to maximise on environmental, economic, cultural and social outcomes to achieve our mission, which is reflected in the outer circle of the diagram. Our values are of particular importance to us. We seek out partnerships and collaboration with parties that have aligned values. Our values are also defined within our Mabulian framework to help crystallise and reinforce what is important to us and how we aim to achieve our objectives by way of our expected corporate, communal and individual behaviours and conduct. Now that I've shared some insight into our cultural framework, vision, mission and values, let me share with you a brief timeline of Yawuru's native title journey and other key milestones associated with Gumuranganjal, Roebuck Plains Station. Yawuru leaders lodged our native title claim in the National Native Title Tribunal in 1994, less than 2 years after the Mabo judgment and only months following the passing of the Federal Native Title Act. Yet it was more than 20 years later that the state government finally recognised our traditional rights through a comprehensive Indigenous land use agreement. Yawuru leaders, led by Uncle Patrick Dodson, negotiated an agreement with the state government in 2010. It was an extraordinary agreement that enabled Yawuru to rebuild our society after 130 years of Western colonial domination, which had detrimental impact and seeded a course of intergenerational trauma. Our agreement remains as the platform of our social and economic empowerment. Via this agreement, approximately 530,000 hectares of Yawuru land in and around Broome, including significant portion of developable land, was returned to Yawuru or earmarked for divestment. The Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation initially purchased Roebuck Plains Station in 1999 for the benefit of Yawuru. In 2006, as part of our native title determination, the federal court determined that the whole of Roebuck Plains Station was to hold the unique status of exclusive possession Yawuru native title. The Yawuru language name, as I've stated previously, and so has Anidai, for the land on which Roebuck Plains Station is located, is Gumuranganjal. In 2016, a Yawuru Indigenous Protected Area, IPA, was declared over areas of cultural and ecological significance on the station for Yawuru management under an IPA management plan. As one of the few multi-tenure land and sea IPA is a commercial recognised in the IPA significant contribution to development in its unique way to its system. Julie Melbourne, Matthews, environmental unit manager, lead the here today, and I acknowledge presenting more about in one of the panels. Goomera and its associated Roebuck Export Depot were handed back to NBY by way of ownership by the ILSC in 2014. And on the 1st of February 2022, NBY took over operations of Goomera through our subsidiary, Yawuru Holdings Company. Yawuru's vision for Goomera is to deliver excellence in sustainable cattle production and to integrate cultural, environmental, economic and social values to create prosperity for Yawuru future generations. Our strategic pillars for the station are consistent with the aspirations and values of our broader strategy that I shared earlier, which is about protection of country through the development and implementation of sophisticated land management practices applying both traditional ecological knowledge and Western science. We aim to develop our people so that they are empowered to operationalise our business and care for our country. And I know that some of you met some of our on-country managers yesterday and had the opportunity to engage with them. For the cattle station, we obviously, with any business, need to ensure commercial viability and sustainability, and we are looking at other economic development opportunities through the identification of divestment options. But also specifically in the case of Goomera, we aim to apply best practice pastoral, animal welfare and grazing practices. Before I hand the mic to Ellen to talk to you about some of the more detailed operational elements of Goomera, I share with you some summarised reflection categorised in 3 sections: past, present and future. As it relates to the past, many of my old people worked in the pastoral industry at a point in time where Aboriginal people were discriminated, oppressed and marginalised via the assimilation policies of this country. They shed blood, sweat and tears working for other people in poor conditions, often only receiving rations for their hard labour, and not being able to access and protect country as per our custodianship responsibilities. The resilience of my old people that I spoke of earlier meant that despite these harsh circumstances and the reality of that past time, today Yawuru are the proud owners and operators of one of the best cattle stations in the Kimberley. As it relates to the present, being since the divestment of Goomera under full Yawuru ownership and operations, we have seen amazing outcomes in line with our vision and objectives, despite operating in a high-risk environment and dealing with multiple challenges and unprecedented circumstances requiring agility and innovation to navigate such complexities. We, like many other businesses, have had to deal with COVID, floods, heavy torrential rain, decreases to market conditions, export issues, the threat of lumpy skin and foot and mouth disease, significant infrastructure upgrade requirements, and importantly, building operational foundations from scratch, particularly in engaging key staff. So if I reflect on the rainy, wet season morning, the week prior to divestment in late January 22, and being just under 2 months into my position as CEO, I'm truly proud of how far we've come since that day. We certainly did take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and we have achieved some amazing outcomes since then. Finally, to the future. Goomera will be a cattle station like no other, achieving operational excellence and sustainable outcomes through the continual application of our holistic development model, contributing to greater impact and outcomes for not only Yawuru people, but for the broader economic empowerment and sustainability of our region and for the sustainability of our country. Kalamabu.
Thanks, Nini, and thanks everybody for having us both here today. As Nini mentioned, Ngayu Nilawal Ellen Smith. My name's Ellen, and I'm the Chief Business Development Officer at Nyambaburi Yaru. Nini spoke to some of our 4 strategic pillars which underpin the operations of Gumaranganyal, and all the best laid plans don't always come to fruition. So can those who came on our tour yesterday at the field trip raise their hands? I think there was, a significant portion of you, which is awesome. So this is the road that we drove across the marine plains to get to Mimiagaman, which was the site that we got out and had a yarn to the country managers at. So this was January earlier this year, and I think it speaks to, I guess, the dynamic environment in which we live and are trying to operate a cattle enterprise. And amazingly, despite these trying conditions, and I acknowledge the people in the Fitzroy Crossing and Fitzroy Valley area who perhaps didn't, come out as well as we did or suffered more significantly, we came out fairly well. And in fact, our stock agent earlier this year told us that we've got the fattest and best looking cattle he's ever seen come off Gumaranganyal, which is really exciting. And then on the flip side, we've got markets that have kind of fallen away. And so we've got an abundance of cattle on our station, probably about 2,000 more head than what we had anticipated or would like to not ordinarily run on the station. And so based on our holistic management model, we're really having to consider, do we prioritise profit or country? And knowing that we have our management grounded in the importance of Yaru culture, which is derived from that connection to country, we really have to, potentially we take a hit and sell those cattle for a loss in order to ensure that we are preserving the country and making sure that we're leaving that legacy for future generations. So with that in mind, and bearing in mind the challenges of the live export market, which is largely where our cattle are destined for, what I'm going to speak to around our operations is where we're attempting to diversify and move away from that over-reliance on live export, as well as some of the initiatives that we're undertaking on Gumaranganyal around the looking after of country, or buru as it's called in Yari language. So our strategic pillars are underpinned by these 4 objectives. The first one is holistic planning maximises the co-benefits of environmental and culturally sensitive country management with pastoral grazing strategies and cattle wellbeing. The second is production and profitability of the cattle enterprise is improved year on year, driving prosperity from a multi-million-dollar turnover. And I think it's worthwhile pointing out here that the Yaru Holdings Company, which is a subsidiary of Nyambaburi Yaru, the operating arm, is ultimately the main financial driver for that organisation. And so the profits that are derived from Gumaranganyal will eventually be funneled back into Nyambaburi Yaru to enable the organisation to deliver amazing projects in youth engagement, employment and training, elders and disability support, delivering language, Yaru language across thousands of students in Broome. So there's amazing initiatives that Nyambaburi Yaru is doing, and that's going to be underpinned by the profitability of the station. And so our third objective is that the Yaru pastoral business has an inclusive, welcoming and safe culture which develops our people and opportunities through training and education pathways. And I really hope that those of you that came out yesterday really felt that in your lian. And the fourth pillar is around new economic and social enterprise opportunities being developed to sustain the Yaru Holdings Company and Gumaranganyal. So that speaks to what I mentioned earlier with regard to the need to diversify and reduce our current over-reliance on the live export market. So one of the ways in which we're doing that is through irrigated agriculture opportunities, and this was a really unique process that we went through which overlaid cultural, environmental, hydrogeology and soil parameters to identify a Goldilocks zone. We were successful in obtaining a 3 gigalitre water licence and a clearing permit for a 420 hectare area. So what we do with this is continuing to evolve and will form part of that diversification plan. We also deliver really fantastic programs through our Wadamajala Mugalai Rise Up to Work program, where we deliver training and employment in the pastoral industry for young Aboriginal people, both Yaru and from across the Kimberley. And this year we have had 12 participants, 11 of which graduated, which is amazing results within the training and employment industry for Indigenous children. And all of those went into employment, which is really exciting. I'll talk as well to Mabuburu, which is Healthy Country. It's the program that's delivered by our environmental services team and some of the fantastic work that they're doing to maintain healthy country. So Nyambaburu Yaru is where our environmental services team sits, and they provide services to Gumaranganyal through the overlay of the Indigenous protected areas, which are the cross-hatched zones on the map there. There's some really important locations around the station, including permanent waterholes or jillas, as well as backing onto a wetland of environmental significance. So Roebuck Plains or Roebuck Bay itself is actually a Ramsar listed site. So huge environmental significance, and we feel an level of responsibility given that our station backs onto that area of environmental significance. So a lot of the work that our country managers do is ensuring that the work that we do on the station doesn't impact the surrounding environments as well as the country itself. Some of the work that our country managers have done is in mapping the groundwater and how it flows, and this was in the development of identifying a site for our agriculture area, and the country managers really developed their skills and expertise in this and are continuing to gather and monitor ground levels and how they rate from year and season. Also do site-based assessments across different sites across the station. They assess the tree canopy, the ground, and also importantly undertake a Lian score, which is how they feel when they're in that country and in that area. And so on this particular day, the Lian was low, and that was because we had some cattle that someone left a gate open and cattle went in there, and it was, trampled a little bit. And so this particular gilla, which is of importance, wasn't in the best condition on that particular day. And that's part of our story. We have a station which is bound by 2 major highways. And so while that's fantastic in terms of logistics, supply chains and access to markets, it's also detrimental in some respects because people enter onto the station willy-nilly and they don't necessarily respect the confines of the cattle enterprise and the country that we're trying to maintain. The team has also been doing sustainable grazing plots and comparing fenced areas alongside unfenced areas, and using satellite and drone footage imagery to test NDVI and get a real understanding of the impacts of cattle and also what happens to country when there's no pressure on it. And in the next stage of their analysis, they'll be looking at, well, what can we introduce to try and stimulate more plant growth, whether that's intensive grazing of cattle or perhaps introducing fire on those areas to see how the grassland responds. The team also does fire management, both in terms of mitigating fire risk to the station as well as endeavours to promote growth and get grassland to really fire up and create really beautiful fodder for the cattle. And some of our achievements operationally over the past 12 months have seen major upgrades to 3 sets of yards, upgrades to 12 watering points, 125 kilometres of fencing renewed or repaired, 100% employment outcomes for our Wadamajala Mugalai participants, implementation of key plans and policies like our Safe Access Policy and Animal Welfare Plan. We've been awarded 2 grants to deliver carbon baseline assessments as well as an ecologically sustainable rangeland management plan. And we're engaging extensively with key industry leaders through the Northern Australian Beef Research Council and RCS Australia and the Minister for Agriculture, and hosting you guys as well at our station. So we're really keen to continue partnership with these communities and partners and key agents. So in the future, we're hoping to continue to diversify our operations, take a holistic management approach, and ultimately be able to sustain this country for future generations in a way that also derives profits, which provides returns back to Nyambaburu Yaru, so that we can continue to deliver some of our amazing services to the community and broader industry. I'll wrap it up there because I've run out of time, but thank you all very much.
Thanks very much, Nini and Ellen. I really enjoyed that. Just learning so much about Roebuck Plains and Nyambaburu Yaru over the last few days. It's been really good. We've got a few minutes left now before the close of this first plenary presentation, where there's 2 roving microphones. So if someone would like to ask Nini or Ellen a question, please put your hand up. We'll get the microphone to you, and just please introduce yourself, just with your name. Would be nice before you ask the question. Thank you. You've got a question up the front here, Cedar.
Thank you. I'm Rob Pearce from Western Queensland. I've been out to Roebuck Plains twice now, yesterday and earlier in the year with the NABRAC tour. And I'm very impressed with how your management and adoption and the training of your young people is very impressive. Are you sending your model to other communities across the country with native title and that taking hold, for them to follow your model in their locations?
So we're actually partnering and in the throes of negotiation with Meat and Livestock Australia to develop a value chain development model, which is underpinned by moving towards a carbon neutral production system. We're undertaking environmental accounting, which will be a world first, incorporating cultural practices as well, through partnership with Australian National University. And so through those particular elements, both of those, sort of publicly funded, out externally facing products that we're hoping will provide some rigour to the way in which our management style and holistic approach is delivered, and through that will provide that level of extension. I think that your question was aimed around the capacity development element of people, of our young people. So the Wadmajala Murgulai program that we run successfully, we worked on that with KPCA and also the TAFE and DPIRD. And so the broader kind of strategic approach of this state for this region is exploring the development of a pastoral academy. And so we see that there's a real fantastic opportunity to embed our program delivery model into that development. So those conversations are happening, and we also directly engage with some other groups who, are wanting to explore how they apply that in their own communities as well. So it's happening.
Hi, it was a very, very inspiring presentation. Thank you. My name's Sandra. I'm here from CSIRO. You just mentioned ANU, and you both mentioned significant science input into your operations. I'm just wondering who else you're partnering with for that science input.
So we're partnering with a number of state government organisations. So Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development will be bringing up their C-lock device to test the methane output of cattle in rangelands country. We're partnering with Department of Water and Environmental Regulation around the water monitoring that's occurring on the station. ANU, Department of Biodiversity Conservation and Attractions, which we do joint management with of country. Who else? Notre Dame University, we're undertaking a research framework development with them. Any others? Just looking at Dean, who's nodding his head.
I think you've captured most of them, but Jules and Gugdeen, if there's any others, maybe you can put that information forward at the separate session. Yep.
Excuse me. We've probably got time for one more question. Thanks, Jennifer.
Greg Brennan from Grazing Innovation Geraldton. I was at the Roebuck Plains tour yesterday, and I felt a very strong Leo. It does make me feel emotional, actually. And I just wondered whether, I've noticed working with other pastoralists and land managers, when they start to work with nature, they get really inspired because they can see that nature's on side and it's really motivating for them. Just wondered if you see an opportunity to extend that monitoring technology to the wider pastoral industry, because I think if we're going to really elevate our land management, we've got to touch into that emotional dimension.
100% agree. From a Yari perspective, the intrinsic link that we have to our country is one that fuels our aspirations to care for it and fulfil our custodianship responsibilities. We know that all of us in this audience today, we are here for a short time in the grand scheme of things. What's going to be left behind is our country. And so we have an obligation collectively in today's society to manage it and understand, tap into that emotional connection, because that, I think, again, that's what's going to fuel us to do the right things in the right way. We are facing broader climate challenges, and the time is now to work towards, a collective approach in honour of our future generations. So I agree. How that happens, I think that's why all of you amazing people are in this room over the course of the next few days, and we're certainly happy to contribute to those strategies, solutions and discussions. So thank you.
Sorry, Matt, I might just also add that my understanding is through Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development and the Soil Commissioner that there's new regulations that have come in around the monitoring and management of rangelands, particularly as they relate to the pastoral estate. And there is, unfortunately, a limited supply of people with the requisite skills who are given the authority under that Act to be able to deliver those monitoring services. I think there's an amazing, amazing opportunity that we could tap into with country managers, Aboriginal people who live on country, who know their country, that could be engaged in delivering those services. And I would love to see that model perhaps start off with Yari people, given the experience and expertise that they have already developed through existing partnerships. But maybe that's food for thought. I'm just going to put that out there for the conference to consider, that there's amazing opportunities there to really elevate the way in which we assess and manage rangelands through the knowledge of traditional owners.
Very much. Thank
Matt, can we beg for one more question, please?
you. Oh, righto. Could we make this one really quick?
Hello. Yeah, my name's Russell Chestnut. I'm a Guniandi person from Eastern Fitzroy Valley. I think you guys mentioned that there will be a presentation on fire. I was at a Roebuck yesterday and I heard some good feedback about land management on country with fire. But before we get to that stage, I wanted to hear from your words how important fire is on country and how beneficial it is, because I understand that some people around the nation don't understand the importance of fire. So I just wanted to hear from you guys, just to touch on it before you get there, because I know you guys will have a different way of presenting your opinions.
I've been told very, very quick. So I'm going to ask Gagdeen and others in the room to probably expand on that in the next section. But as Ellen highlighted, it's fundamentally important from a commercial aspect in terms of mitigating fire risks. But more importantly, Yarru has always applied, as I know Gunyandi and other traditional owners have, in managing the country for, revegetation and growth in certain areas for certain flora and fauna and all of those kind of things. So long story short, fundamentally important, but Gug, you happy to talk to that a little bit later? Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nini and Ellen. Obviously did a great job of questions. And are you going to be around for the next few days?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be great. So plenty of time to catch up between sessions and maybe over dinner. So thank you very much. Please put your hands together. The second plenary presentation of the morning will be delivered by Dr. Beverly Henry on soil carbon sequestration in the rangelands, realities and risks. Beverly Henry has worked in academic, agricultural industry and government roles on issues relating to the agriculture and land use sectors for 30 years. Her focus has been on technical research and science for policy aspects of climate variability, climate change, land management and greenhouse gas accounting. She is an adjunct associate professor at Queensland University of Technology, co-chair of the Scientific and Technical Committee of the International 4 per 1,000 Initiative, a member of several Australian and international advisory panels and committees, and was formerly a member of the Australian Government's Emissions Reduction Assurance Committee. Please join me in welcoming Beverly.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Matt, for that introduction. I've been asked to talk to you this morning about soil carbon sequestration, and it's a bit of a daunting task. It's a hot topic at the moment, and it's a topic that I think you could describe as being subject to the robust discussion that Peter referred to. What I'm going to do today is try to rely on the evidence that we have from science past and for the trials that many of you have been involved in. But I'm going to start just with a little bit of context and a description of the terms that we're using, because I think this is part of the reason for the robust discussion. Now, I don't need to remind anyone here of the value of the rangelands. It's a little bit sensitive, I think. And especially after the very powerful welcome to country that we have. We're talking about a very vast area of land, one that is the home and provides the home and the livelihoods for millions of people, but is also of great social and cultural value. And it's very diverse. Now, all of these things come together to make it a very difficult area to work with. It's obviously sensitive to a lot of environmental issues too. But after the welcome to country, I also want to pay my respects to the Yarru people, the traditional owners of this land on which we stand, and their elders past and present, and acknowledge the love and the care they have for the country. But despite this value, despite its long history, it's only quite recently that there's been a global focus in understanding the soils of the rangelands. There's been much more investment in more temperate and more productive lands, perhaps. And it's only in the last year or so that we've had a global soil organic carbon map developed for the rangelands, which I would like to show you if I could. Okay, so I'm going to talk without the slides, but when they come back, you will see that in the rangelands, they cover globally under the definitions at the International Livestock Research Institute, they cover as much as 54% of the land area, but really about 25% of the surface land-free area of the globe is used for grazing. And that land holds about 30% of the soil carbon globally. But if you look at the map that will come up eventually, you'll see that the amount of soil carbon per unit area is largely at the lower end of other lands. So we're starting from a baseline, and a natural baseline due to the low productivity that reflects aridity in many regions and unreliable rainfall and often poor nutrient soils. We're starting from a position of low soil organic carbon naturally. Even so, since the Paris Agreement, there's been a large increase in interest in the potential to increase the soil carbon. Even a small percentage increase per unit area multiplied by an area of 79.5 million square kilometres is going to be a large amount of carbon, and that has sparked interest and a lot of new interest in here. But the science is still emerging. The policy is emerging probably at a much greater rate even than the science, and the number of stakeholders across carbon market people and various land management people as well as NGOs has also expanded. So we have a sort of rather difficult environment in which to work. So I'll just keep talking. So that's the context that we have globally. In Australia, the rangelands cover a large percentage of our land area, but there's soils that are largely poor in soil carbon. They have low organic matter, and that reflects something that I'll talk about a little bit later, but hangs on the primary productivity, understanding that soil carbon comes initially from plant growth. If you don't have plant growth, the soil carbon can't increase. And most lands within the rangelands have less than 40 tonnes of carbon per hectare, and many are less than 20 tonnes of carbon per hectare. So we want to understand how soil carbon can be sequestered, and to do that, we have to speak about some terms that we're going to use quite often. But I think different interpretations and different uses of the terms are part of the reason for the robust discussions. So soil contains carbon in two forms, organic and inorganic, and I apologise, this is pretty basic, but unless we're talking about the same thing, we're not going to make a lot of progress. So when we talk about soil carbon sequestration, we focus on the organic carbon portion of that carbon because that's the part that responds to management, and that's the part that we're very interested in increasing, or to understand whether we can increase by a change in management. Sorry, I'm still looking for slides. So carbon enters the soil as a result of photosynthesis, taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, converting it into plant material, plant residues and root material, root exudates, and microbial populations that get their energy from that plant material being incorporated in the soil. Now, soil organic carbon is that portion that's less than 2 millimetres inside. So plant litter and bits of root, for instance, that are greater than 2 millimetres shouldn't be counted as soil carbon. the soil carbon, once it enters the soil, is decomposed by microbes, and in the process of respiration, much of that carbon in organic matter is returned to the atmosphere. So it returns to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, and in a stable community, they're fairly much in balance. The carbon that's going in through carbon dioxide and going out through respiration is fairly much in balance, and you get a sort of threshold of soil carbon level. But some of it, a small proportion, becomes stabilised. The fast cycling part is lost within days to decades, but a small proportion can, through chemical and physical transformations, be protected from further breakdown and held in the soil for periods of centuries, even thousands of years. And that part represents a net removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and therefore contributes to climate change mitigation or carbon dioxide sequestration. And that's the part that's receiving all the attention at the moment. So we need to understand how we can keep putting organic matter into the soil, organic carbon, and I'll just make it clear, organic matter is about 58% carbon, and that's the part that we're talking about. So we want to know how we can increase the amount of carbon going into the soil, but also increase the amount that's stabilised. And it's not easy. It's not easy to measure that, because ultimately what we're looking at is a small change against a much larger background and a very variable soil and spatially diverse environment, and one that's also temporally diverse, because it depends on plant growth, and we all know how variable our rangeland climates are. So I'm just going to go through this just to catch up. Okay, so this is the global soil map, and you can see, if my face wasn't in the way, that Australia has the light colours there, Northern Africa, and many of the rangelands of the world have those light colours that signify low soil carbon. The Australian rangelands, and I've taken a fairly broad definition. The boundaries aren't critical, but they are areas that are that the primary production in those lands is grazing livestock, and that they haven't been subjected to intense modification and intense agriculture. And this is the soil organic carbon map of Australia that was developed from a large investment in sampling by the government, the federal government, and you can see that the lighter colour there, less than up to 30, largely tonnes per hectare, but up to 40 in the savannas, is low relative to the coastal arable regions. Whoops. Okay. This is, yeah. Okay, I think I've got, I skipped this one because I didn't have the prompt of the slides, but I wanted to just say about the growth in interest in soil carbon sequestration projects in Australia. And as you know, Australia counts soil carbon sequestration towards its targets for the Paris Agreement. It has a strong interest in understanding how we can increase soil carbon, and it has promoted soil carbon projects through a carbon crediting scheme that you probably have seen referred to as the Emission Reduction Fund, called Carbon Farming. I think it's now changed its name to be called the ACU, Australian Carbon Credit Unit Scheme. But what this shows is that while the method was first available as far past as 2014, the growth was initially small in the amount of projects that were being registered, but it has grown just about exponentially. And the 45 for 2023 is an interim number up until about July. But there's currently 470 projects registered. It's the fastest growing across all sectors. And there's recently been a large issue of ACCUs made. There were very few, less than 2,000, up until 2020, or up until 2022. But there's recently been a big increase, and I'm happy to talk to someone later about that. It takes a bit of explaining about why there was a slow uptake, but it's up and away now. And just for interest, this is where the projects are. There's various methods listed down the bottom that give you the colours. This is where projects have been registered, and I've just tried to highlight there the Queensland areas that show exactly where they are. As you can see, there aren't any yet in these northern areas, but nevertheless, there are projects in the rangelands, and we need to be aware of how we can manage the interest and any potential risks, as well as promote any opportunities. So that's what I'm talking about today. And this is what I was discussing in the way soil carbon enters the soil and the complexity of what soil carbon is. That it is not a single homogeneous substance. It exists in a number of forms that remain in the soil for a range of times. And soil carbon sequestration is okay. It's a small part of, it's slow to respond, and okay. So the amount that's sequestered is a small part of the total soil carbon, and I won't go through that explanation because I'm going to run out of time again, but again, I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. The other point I really would like to make here is that both the fast cycling and the slow cycling carbon pools are important for production in the rangelands. We focus for climate change reasons, for carbon crediting reasons, on sequestered soil carbon. But the fast cycling pool is absolutely fundamental for productivity. And building soil organic matter, soil organic carbon, is critical for maintaining soil health and for production. And in some ways they're complementary. The persistent or slow cycling portion provides some benefits, not only soil carbon sequestration, but in terms of water storage and nutrient immobilisation. It's positive in that way, although nutrient immobilisation, depending on your circumstances, can be detrimental to growth. But the rapid turnover pool, as the organic matter breaks down, releases the nutrients that are needed for growth. Now, this is pretty basic, and the great majority of you will be well on top of that, but it's just the context in which we look at what we're trying to do to manage for soil organic carbon sequestration. Okay, so going back to this map about the low soil carbon, does a low soil organic carbon mean that there's potential to build it up to the high levels of 200 tonnes of carbon per hectare that you might see around the coast? Well, the answer is probably not always, and the reason for that is that the amount of carbon in soil is largely controlled by rainfall, by temperature, by the soil properties, and particularly by the amount of clay in soil, and then by land use. So cropping, for instance, disturbs the soil, exposes organic matter to break down, and you often, or almost always, leads to a decline in soil carbon. So these are 4 parameters, 4 factors that are important in determining the amount of organic matter that goes in and is lost. But does that mean management doesn't have a chance? And the answer is probably no. But if you integrate those there are possibilities for management, but the net primary productivity is an integration of what happens, and we have to look at that to understand how much organic matter goes in. Unless we get additions and control what happens, we're not going to sequester carbon, and that's the reality. But how much is possible is... sorry, this is very jumpy. Is the question, how much impact can we make with management? There was a survey done by Rabbi et al. And published in 2015 along the eastern states. So it's not all rangelands. And the findings for each state are fairly similar. So what I've done here is just show the Queensland results. And they use a standardised effect on soil carbon stock of 7 or 8 key drivers of organic matter. So latitude, and that relates a lot to temperature. So elevation, aridity, slope, clay, and then 3 that relate to management: pasture types, residue, and land uses. The greatest effect is aridity, which is a combination of rainfall and temperature factors. And the second on that, in terms of ranking, is clay. Now, it's the clay content of the soil that largely provides the ability for organic carbon to be protected from microbial breakdown. So it's a factor that's most important in stabilisation. And when you look at this, you can see that the 3 factors on your right-hand side that have the smallest effect. So management can have an effect, but it is small and constrained by the drivers of climate and soil factors and landscape factors, and particularly rainfall, which has been shown in some circumstances to control as much as 90% of the difference. So these are important, but that's what we're looking at when we talk about changing management to increase soil carbon. So can we increase soil organic carbon? So it's a question that we looked at in a review of the Northern Australian rangelands, and DAF funded this review. It looked at all the papers that had data on soil carbon, and only about 60 of those papers had suitable data for looking at soil organic carbon because of the measurement requirements that are set out in international standards of having to measure soil organic carbon stocks. The percent carbon in the top 10 centimetres does not tell you whether you're sequestering carbon. And we collated the data under 3 management types: grazing management strategies, pasture management, and land conversion strategies. So what this review found was that there were some opportunities, but there was a lot of inconsistencies in the results, and none of the trends were actually significant based on the few data that we have. So sowing forage legumes or more productive grasses increased soil carbon consistently by about 0.1 to 0.3 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year. Prolonged high stocking rates almost always led to a lower soil organic carbon level compared to conservative stocking. Grazing management strategies such as rotational grazing or intensive time control grazing, we could find no consistent or no significant effect in the published research and the previous trials. Sequestration was more consistent when you started from a degraded baseline. So if you'd lost soil carbon through overgrazing or other reasons, you were more likely to be able to increase. There were significant co-benefits for water holding capacity, resilience to drought, etc., associated with many of the practices that were implemented really to increase soil carbon. But trade-offs are possible. Trade-offs in terms of costs and in terms of loss of flexibility in management. So I won't go through that. In any more detail, but the overarching observations were that there are a few long-term studies in the rangelands that have high-quality data on sequestration. Studies had marked differences in design, in measurements, and in implementation of practices that made it difficult to draw any conclusions. And as a result, there were inconsistencies in results between studies. And that increases the uncertainty in what is achievable. If you compare the results that we had in that review for the Northern Grainlands, they're broadly consistent with other reviews. And I've put references to just 3 there, but there's a whole body of information. That opportunities are likely to be modest. We need more long-term studies, and the long-term stability or permanence of the sequestration of carbon, even when it's been measured over a couple of decades, is unknown. And I'm just going to touch on that because I think it's a critical issue in terms of the risks component of my title. This study refers to one at Condobolin led by Warwick Badgery, and it shows the change in soil carbon. Now, it is only in the top 10 centimetres, but it's indicative of other work that shows deeper trends. And there's 4 treatments, but it doesn't matter. The trends are the same. And the red ones noted are for perennial pastures. And you can see in this study, they increased for 12 years, but then in 3 years when the rainfall was less and nutrients were probably run down, you lost it all. There was no change in management that led to that loss. And I think that's something we have to be aware of. And climate change is an even bigger problem, I think, coming up. This was a study done for the government, and it shows that of all the ERF methodologies, of all the carbon farming methods out there, soil carbon projects were most susceptible to changes in climate, to warming and to unreliable rainfall. And that's because that affects both accumulation of carbon and the propensity to lose it. So what I'm going to do is just skip through the realities and the risks. We need more long-term trials. We need to be able to assess the co-benefits and the trade-offs, because that is what determines whether producers in the rangelands are going to take up changes in management. We need accurate, cost-effective measurement methods. That's a major stumbling block to participation in possible rewards from soil carbon, and we need accessible databases so that we can share knowledge. And we need some risk assessment tools and independent information and advisory services on carbon credit opportunities. I've run out of time, so I'm not going to talk to this slide, but it just shows the variability in rangelands, and I have to thank everyone that contributed to the sort of work I've been talking about. Thank you.
Bev, I apologise for the IT difficulties, but thanks for pushing through it. I really appreciate you just kept going. Thank you. One of the benefits of a face-to-face conference is the opportunity to talk between sessions, breakfast, over dinner with many of the different presenters. So I'm pleased to let everybody know that Beverly's going to be with us for the duration of the conference, and I encourage you to talk to Beverly, especially about all things carbon. I just don't think we got the full picture there of what Beverly's capable and knows. So I really encourage people to take the opportunity and catch up with Beverly throughout the conference. Thank you. We are running on time, but we've got time for one quick question. So, Rosie's first hand up.
Hi Beverly, thanks very much for the presentation. I just had a question about soil organic carbon within HIR areas. So obviously we know that aridity and soil, like the clay content, can impact on the soil organic carbon, and we can lose the soil organic carbon pretty easily, and water has a big effect. But I'm just wondering, and I've heard there's the potential when you're doing vegetation-based projects, that there's a potential to do soil carbon within these areas. And I just wanted to hear if you have any evidence or you've seen any ability to hold that soil organic carbon, because the loss of that soil organic carbon would impact the project and make it unviable, obviously because of the cost of setup and sampling and all of those.
Look, that's an excellent question, and it's quite complex actually. There is a method being developed that will, whether it actually gets written into law is another question, and we're not up to that stage, but there is a method being developed that allows you to have both soil carbon projects and vegetation projects on the same piece of land. The evidence that we looked at earlier showed that there was little evidence for an increase in soil carbon under trees unless you were starting from a degraded baseline. And we really don't have the long-term data to understand whether it's going to be persistent or likely to be lost. When the vegetation method was made, soil carbon wasn't included because of the uncertainty and because of the need to be conservative in what credits were given for. So I can't fully answer your question, but I'll have a chat later.
Because so many hands went up when we asked the question, we'll take one more, but please keep the question quick, please.
Thanks for that presentation, Beverly. Blythe Cowden speaking. I was just curious as to whether the management on the two properties were issued the 150,000 carbon credits this year were assessed as part of that management affecting sequestration rates.
The review that was referred to for Northern Grayslands was completed before that issuance, and it looked at literature that was published or incredible reports that were online, so that those results weren't out in time. And I think it's important that we do have more transparency in projects so that they can be assessed readily and that data brought together so we all can build some better understanding of what's happening. Until we have the data and understand how it was measured and what the numbers were and how the modelling was done, it's really difficult to comment.
Thanks, Beverly, and please put your hands together. That was a wonderful presentation. To all the other MCs out there, please don't use me as an example this morning. Yeah. The final plenary, and we'll just push into Smoko too, so thank you. The final plenary presentation of the morning will be delivered by Dr. Anthony O'Grady on natural capital, what it is, the opportunities, risks and a pathway forward. Anthony is a Senior Principal Research Scientist with CSIRO Environment based in Hobart, Tasmania. His research career has spanned a number of Australian biomes. He obtained his PhD in the Northern Territory in 2000, examining carbon and water fluxes in the savannas of Northern Australia. He has worked on groundwater-dependent ecosystems in the arid heart and studied the growth and productivity of cooler temperate forests. All this work has been underpinned by a desire to support rural and regional livelihoods while simultaneously better managing our natural resources. In recent years, he has focused on the integration of environmental knowledge using natural capital accounting and is currently working with primary producers, forestry companies and the resources sector with the aim of building capability in natural capital accounting across Australia. Please join me in welcoming Anthony. It looks like a very flighty remote, so I should have a try first, Anthony. And we'll take your time, we'll go through into Smoko.
This one here?
This one here.
Okay. Great, yeah. Thanks. Good luck, that's a great way to start a talk, isn't it? Thanks, Matt. I'll start off by acknowledging the Yawuru people, their elders past and present, and thank them for having me on their country. I'd also like to thank the organising committee for having me here today, particularly Matt and Ian Watson, who have given me the opportunity to escape a Tasmanian winter and top up my vitamin D levels here in sunny Broome. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge my team. I mean, I am the person up here talking, but you're only as good as your team, and I've got a fantastic team, and the work that we've done that I hope we're presenting today is a combination of many years of work and hard work on their part. So really what I want to do today is just give a little bit of an introduction to this concept of natural capital. And there'll be three terms you'll hear quite often around the place, and that's natural capital accounting, and natural capital assessment. There's nothing new about natural capital. In fact, many of you probably know more about natural capital than me. You're actively managing it every day. And it's really just the stocks of the renewable and non-renewable resources that we use, and these renewable resources can be considered as ecosystems themselves. And these stocks of resources and ecosystems produce the environmental services that provide the basis for evaluation of the underlying ecosystem assets. And I think, the term natural capital is a deliberate choice of words. It's really designed to help us recognise the fact that the underlying ecosystem resources or the ecosystems themselves should be treated as assets because they produce these benefits that we all, they produce these ecosystem services that we all benefit from. And so natural capital accounting then is just simply the process of measuring those stocks, measuring the ecosystem services and valuing those stocks, those ecosystem services. And so valuation, when we talk about valuation here, it can be, it's a much broader concept than just a simple monetary valuation. The other thing that you'll hear a lot of, particularly lately, is the term natural capital assessment. And in many respects is very similar to the process of natural capital accounting, but it has a slightly different focus. So in a natural capital assessment, an organisation or an individual might be starting to understand how their actions or their management actions are impacting on natural capital, or how their organisation might depend on that natural capital. And the reason for doing that is really about understanding the risks that disruptions to that natural capital can pose for the organisation. And so it's really designed to support decision making and help an organisation to identify the mitigating activities to address disruptions to natural capital, or help them to identify new opportunities in the future. So, and here we go again. Just a quick. Damn. We'll get there. No. Yeah. Don't touch it. All right. And so why does it matter? So nature is now a material issue for many businesses. And I think there have been two landmark reviews in this changing perspective. The first was the Stern Review in 2006 that really set itself up to examine the risks that climate change are going to cause to the global economic system. In 2021, the Discovery took on the challenge and really started to impact that the global financial system faces ongoing loss of nature and the loss of biodiversity. You know, may have heard quite about these two. The headline is over half of global or moderate on nature, and so there's been a focus, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, to understand what and how to go about addressing nature and try to start the curve on this. And so, you know, the COP15 agreed to reach a target of no net loss of no further loss of nature by 2030 against a 2020 baseline. And so it's a very ambitious task, and so it's going to be a difficult challenge to meet. And so on the back of that, there's been a proliferation of initiatives, frameworks, measurement protocols and things like that. And so, you know, for many, it really is just an acronym soup. And so I think, you know, but, you know, there's a, you know, for someone stepping into the natural capital space, it can be quite an overwhelming space and quite a confusing space. And so there's a real need to start to think about, well, how do all these different pieces come together? And so this is a slide that I stole from the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. And it's one that I've adapted because I didn't think that it was quite complete. And so at a high level, we have the Convention on Biological Diversity and the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, setting these broad global targets for society to meet, you know, keep temperatures to below 1.5 degrees Celsius and reverse this loss of nature. But they've also realised that governments can't do this alone, and so there's been a real focus on energising the private sector to take responsibility for the challenge. And so what you'll see in many of the initiatives that were on the previous slide, it really comes down to 4 or 5 main key factors. And it starts with an understanding of an organisation's impacts on natural capital and their dependencies on natural capital, and using that information to better understand the risks that disruptions to that supply of natural capital might cause for the organisation going forward. Not only the risk, and so that provides a basis then to start to formulate how we're going to identify the mitigations required to address these challenges and what further opportunities are there for us to shift the levers and change management so that we can address that. But what wasn't in the TNFD work was that underlying this, you know, is an information system that can be well supported by a well-constructed set of environmental accounts. And I think bringing that together in a simple way hopefully will help to address some of the confusion that's out there in the market at the moment. And so accounting is really just you know, if we think about environmental accounting, it has a lot of characteristics that we see in existing financial accounting. So the concepts of double entry bookkeeping are all through the environmental accounting space as well. And so really they're just information systems to help us structure and bring together a whole range of different data sets and information on our transactions with the environment. And so our hypothesis is that if we can more formally integrate financial accounting with environmental accounting, we'll get a much stronger indication of nature's contributions to the economy. Or more simply put, nature's an asset, and we need to start thinking of nature as an asset. But existing accounting standards really are missing a large part of the pie. So this is a sort of conceptual model of a farm, and we can see, you know, some natural capital is already captured in the agricultural accounting standards. That's the livestock and the plants and things like that. And other assets on the farm, like the property and plant equipment, are also well catered for in terms of existing accounting standards, but nature creates lots of benefits and services. And so the challenge for us is then, how do we bring in these additional assets, the underlying soils, the water, the ecosystems, the shelter belts, or the remnant vegetation? How do we recognise those in a set of formula accounting? And that's really quite important, because we know that the ecosystem services that these produce have both private benefits for the landowners, but also a broader societal benefit. And so really, natural capital accounting is all about just making those ecosystems, the underlying ecosystem assets, visible, and recognising the benefits that they provide to the enterprise. I think I've lost a slide. All right. And so, the accounting model itself is actually quite simple. It consists of 4 steps. It's actually classifying and identifying the ecosystem assets that are on your property, and that usually involves some sort of mapping and detailed mapping of your ecosystems and your other assets on the farm. Measuring the condition of those assets, and it's that combination of asset extent, or the stock of assets, and the condition of those assets that give us an understanding of the capacity of those ecosystems to produce the ecosystem services that are inputs into our businesses. And so, and typically those ecosystem services can be provisioning services. So, for many of you here, it might be livestock production or fodder production. They can be the regulating services that Beverly was talking about before, the role of these ecosystems in sequestering carbon and managing climate change. And then, or they could be more cultural services as well. So the enjoyment that we receive from nature, the spiritual benefits that we receive from nature. And so the accounting system helps us start to quantify those values and start to bring them together in a structured and organised way. But I just broke your pointer. But it's a lot of work. So, when we started out on this journey, we asked ourselves, well, what's the value proposition for this? Extending the existing accounting standards is a big ask for anyone. And so we spent a lot of time speaking to a whole range of stakeholders around what they perceive the value proposition for natural capital accounting to be. And we came into that with, I suppose, a preconceived idea that, if private enterprise is going to adopt natural capital accounting, there has to be a real bang for buck in that. And so the three sort of main drivers that were floating around at the time were that there would be you would attract premium prices for your produce. There would be a lot of the banks were getting on board at the time, and there was a lot of talk around discounted finance for good stewards of natural capital, and of course the ever-present environmental markets. Would we be able to help provide the information in a structured and organised way to help people engage more fully in environmental markets? But what we found from possibly over about 200 interviews was that really the main drivers were actually were more about the organisation's environmental stewardship of its assets, ensuring that the organisation could maintain market access, and using the accounting system in the way it's designed to be able to pull the levers internally to adjust their management and ensure that the allocation of capital to environmental management was done effectively and efficiently. But there were some surprises in there as well. One of the key things that came up all the time was around the organisation's reputation. And they wanted to be, and that was about wanting to be seen as an employer of choice and quite a proactive employer. And so really about building that social capital around the organisation. So it was surprising. The sort of economic drivers were mentioned way less than we were actually expecting. So, but really underlying theme, really developing robust, transparent account of the organisation, the natural capital it has under management. But it's a good job. So up on screen is that we're working on in Tasmania, and spare you the pain through 15 of data. But what I want to pull out is if we think things from an perspective, we need to bring information in on the extent of the ecosystems, the land use of those ecosystems, the carbon and greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with those management actions, the biodiversity outcomes that are occurring on the farm, your soil health, the water use, and climate as well. And so what it is a massive lot of information that's really highly spatially explicit. It's not, but not only spatially explicit, it's temporally explicit as well. And so for any organisation, that's a major challenge. Even for us still in CSIRO pulling this together, it's still a major undertaking. And so, but I do think there's a real opportunity, and it's just on our doorstep to actually make this happen in a cheap and effective way. And I think that's probably one of the big things. It's almost a responsibility on us, because we have to make this, if this is going to become something that is mainstream, we have to make it accessible. It has to be, affordable, and it has to be robust. And so it can't be something that just a few wealthy organisations do. We need to make it open access and something that all organisations can work on. And so we are currently working on systems to help do that. And I do believe that within the next probably 3 to 5 years, we'll be able to start to deliver really high resolution spatial information in a way that is meaningful for the use in accounts. But of course, that still leaves us with one challenge. How do we present so much information in a coherent and consistent manner? And so the approach that we've been experimenting with is borrowed directly from existing accounting standards and the concept of general financial reporting. And so what we've found is that we can start to express all this information on ecosystem accounts in a way similar to, in a way and structure similar to what we see in general purpose financial accounting. And so what we're working with at the moment are 3 key natural capital statements. So a natural capital balance sheet, which is analogous to a financial balance sheet. An ecosystem change statement, which is analogous to the cash flow statement that you see in financial reports, and talks about the changes in the operating position of the company between 2 balance periods, and a natural capital profit and loss statement, which is analogous to the income statement that we see, which starts to record the flows of ecosystem services in and out of the business during the accounting period. And so this is what we've seen so far, is that this approach is working quite well for a bunch of, for any organisation that we've worked with. And so we currently work with individual farmers, forestry companies, right through to big ASX listed companies as well. But it doesn't capture the full scope of the problem, because many of the impacts and dependencies that an organisation has falls outside the operational boundaries often falls outside of the operational boundaries of the organisation. And so what we've had to develop is another 3 statements that are shown there on the impact statement, the dependency statement, and the risks and opportunity statements. And this is specifically designed to respond to the growing disclosure requirements that are being driven by the Task Force for Climate-related Financial Disclosures and the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures. So I was going to show you some of these statements, but they're very hard to present in an interesting way. So, but what I do want to say is that what we have spent a lot of time is around developing guidance materials to help people build their capacity and to try and show people in a real way how this information comes down, this really dense information data set comes down into some quite succinct natural capital statements. And so we have one for the forestry sector at the moment. I'm currently just developing one for the resources sector, and later this week I think the one in the middle will be launched as part of a more general guidance material to natural capital accounting and and some of our thinking in this space. But importantly, what we're seeing is companies starting to adopt this. So earlier in the year, the BHP released their peanut pilot accounts, which was an operating mine in Western Australia, and I'm fortunate to work with a company, a forestry company in Tasmania called Foraco, who are now up to their third natural capital report, and so we're seeing quite a lot of enthusiasm from corporates to adopt this because they understand the language of profit and loss statements, balance sheets, and income statements. And so I'm going to leave it there, but I do want to just reflect on the diversity of collaborators we've had over this journey. And when I was pulling this slide together, and I'm probably going to have to apologise to a few of our partners because I'm pretty sure I'll have left some off, but what it demonstrates is there's just been right across the sector, particularly land-based sectors, there's been a massive amount of interest and urgency around trying to adopt the natural capital accounting approach, adopt natural capital accounting more broadly. And so, and it's only been, I thought it might level off at some point, but it just seems to be getting hotter and hotter the whole time. So, thank you.
Thanks very much, Tony. And once again, Tony's going to be with us to the conference end, so there'll be plenty of time for questions over the next few and a half days. Tony, coming a bit under time, so we've got a good few minutes for some questions. So please put your hand up if you've got a question for Tony, and we'll get a microphone.
Try and save you some time.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tony. Richard Marver, Contour Consulting. Really comprehensive presentation on the sort of data capture methods and how we actually record the data that we capture when we're doing natural capital accounting. But I guess an even more complex question that I have is around how we start to assign value to that data. What do we value a jarrah forest versus a spinifex grassland as far as how it's performing and behaving? And in my experience, everybody's got a different value on species versus ecosystems and other things. So is there research and kind of work being done towards standardising an approach to placing value on different things? And, when we start to see these BHP reports, we can actually say with confidence, yes, they're performing well, or no, they're not?
Yeah, it's a really good, and I think it's a really important question. So the way the valuation is currently constructed in ecosystem accounting is a very narrow lens, and that narrow lens is specifically designed. When you think about the history of how it's come together, the environmental accounting that's outlined in things like the SIA is really designed to support the system of national accounts, and so they have some strict approaches to the valuation problem, and for very sound reasons for doing that. I think there is an opportunity to take a broader perspective on valuation within an organisational context. But again, I think that we're just going to have to be very careful that we don't get into an area where we start double counting and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be an active area of research over the next probably 5 or 6 years in sort of bringing in not only a monetary valuation perspective, but other valuation perspectives into the accounts. But I think there's still some way to go in solving that challenge, for sure.
Thank you.
Robin Cowley, Primary Industries NT. I don't even know if it's related, but it made me wonder, is this relevant to the potential for property values to be linked to land condition? And, do you see that as being an incentive for places and ever actually being implemented in reality?
Have to tread carefully here, right? Because I'd imagine yes, and I think to some extent land condition is sort of maybe somewhat subjectively incorporated in property valuations anyway, and so it might actually help us to put some more rigour around some of that. I think that's definitely on the cards. I've been approached by a number of land valuers over the journey, and they're all sort of thinking about that land valuation perspective. So I think it's definitely something that's possible, but I think we've still got some way to go before that gets incorporated more formally.
Hi, Nini Mills here. Just expanding or extending on the question that was asked previously around, additional value aspects that should be considered as part of the methodology. Yaru, one of our research projects in collaboration with ANU, is in advancing environmental accounting methodology, importantly applying the cultural foundation. So you mentioned briefly that element by way of cultural spiritual aspects, but is there any tangible ways thus far, noting that you've already said there's an opportunity to expand on the methodology, is there any tangible ways by which the traditional ecological knowledge aspects and customary values as perceived by Aboriginal people incorporated in anything that you've shared?
Yeah, it is a good question, and I've seen snippets of the work that ANU have been doing. Look, I can't say there's a tangible way forward at the moment, but I do think, one of my team members is an accountant, right, and she'll tell me if you can measure it, I can account for it. And so I think if you can come up with that approach and start to present, there's nothing to stop you presenting a number of different perspectives on valuation right now. If you can outline your methodology and make it clear what you're doing, actually I don't see any real barriers to that. I think the thing that we have to be careful of in terms of the way this valuation works is, ideally, we've gone down the path we have because we have an explicit goal that we want to bring the financial accounts and the natural capital accounts together more formally, and so there'll be strict rules in terms of how that integration occurs. But in terms of bringing in other perspectives and using the accounts to present those other perspectives and values, I don't see any bounds on that at all. So. Yeah, sure.
Don Burnside, Tony. Thank you very much. I gather from reading of the popular press in recent times that the Federal Treasurer is starting to think about a parallel set of accounts for how the government reports budgets and GDP, etc., etc. Are you operating in that sort of area at all?
Not me personally, but people within my group are. So in Surrey, we're coming at this from the two perspectives. So obviously the federal government has a national strategy around environmental accounting, and all the states and governments have signed up to that. And so people within my program are actually working on that on the national accounting perspective, and we're coming at it from a bottom-up perspective in my team and in our group, and I think there's a real power in coming at it from those both perspectives, because we'll get a much richer vision and picture of sort of the natural capital and its contributions to enterprises from a bottom-up scale, and then we can start to constrain that with the sort of top-down piece. But I think I think you need both to come at it, and it's definitely happening. So I think that was my last allowed question. So.
Thanks very much, Anthony. Can we please put our hands together? Sorry, mate. Yeah, thanks very much. That's the end of the morning's plenary session. Can we just put our hands together one more time for all the presenters? That was great. After morning tea, concurrent sessions will begin. Concurrent session number 1 on traditional land use and management will be in the semi-room up the back. Concurrent session number 2, coming to grips with carbon, natural capital, will be here in the Jimmy Chai Hall. We'll reconvene in 20 minutes. Thank you very much.